Okay. So we're learning the laws of Tefilin. Just scrolling through the screens if it helps you remember. This is the order of putting on the Tefillin. So in general, we spoke about the earliest time, where to place it, when to put them on, how to put them on, the order of putting them on, putting them directly on, and one after the other. About having the right intention when we put them on, how they are two separate mitzvahs. We spoke about that yesterday. And then a left-handed person. So just to summarize what we discussed about a left-handed person, there are two reasons brought in the Gemara as to why we put our tefillin on the secondary hand. The one reason is because we should use the hand that we write with to tie with. And since most people write with their right hand, they tie with their right hand onto the left hand. And the other reason is because we should put the tefillin on the weaker hand. And I fall between those two reasons because I can only write with my left hand, but my right hand is stronger. This is a big debate amongst the halakhic authorities, what is of primary importance. But the primary opinion is that the main reason is the reason that has to do with writing. And therefore, whichever hand you write with, that is the hand that you will use to tie the tefillin onto the opposite hand. Now moving on to section 14. Care should be taken that the black side of the straps face outwards. Why do the straps need to be black? I don't know if there is a reason. And if you're wondering what the source for this is, the source of this is Mount Sinai. You see, some things are written clearly in the Torah. Other things, Hashem told Moshe orally, and he told it to his student and his student. This is called the oral law. When it comes to the tefillin, there are a number of details which are not mentioned at all in the scriptures, but rather have simply been handed down from generation to generation. And one of those details is that the straps should be black. Now, if it happens that the straps became inverted, they got twisted, and when we say the straps got twisted, we're not talking about the straps that hang down the side. That's not a problem. We mean the very strap that ties it to you, which would be the strap that goes directly around the head, or the very first strap around the arm. That's pretty not good. And he says you must either fast or redeem yourself by giving tzedakah. In fact, the Gemara speaks about Rav Huda. Rav Huda was one of the great sages of the Talmud. And the Gemara is describing when he was being buried and the burial processions and how they weren't sure how to honor him in the most befitting way, where exactly he should be buried, who exactly should be the one to bury him. And one particular sage speaks about his experiences with Rav Huda, and he says that his strap once turned over, and he fasted for 40 days, 40 fasts, in order to rectify the not being done correctly. Certainly today we are not on a level to be fasting like that, as the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch mentions already in the start, either to fast once or to give the amount of money of 3 meals. But this does tell us of the importance of making sure that they don't turn over. The way we can ensure this is when we put on the tefillin, right after putting on your hand tefillin, just to slide your finger around to feel that it's not twisted. And the same with the head tefillin, just to slide your fingers around to make sure that they're not twisted, because they can easily get twisted. And as far as what follows, that's of lesser concern. So you would like to feel that your straps are having the black side of the outside, but there's no halachic problem if the straps that are dangling become twisted. Similarly, if the tefillin fall to the ground when they are not in their bag, meaning not in their box, but the bare tefillin themselves, if that falls on the floor, that's also a pretty serious matter. And here he says one must fast. I will speak with the rabbi to see whether you're up for that. And he, in the Shulchan Aruch, he actually here mentions that, and the Torah, even if it's in its bag, if it falls, one must fast. And I just found the putting the two laws one next to the other quite revealing. The fact that the Shulchan Aruch says if the tefillin fall without the box or the Torah falls with the cover, then one must fast. It tells us how holy these tefillin are. It's almost like we have a Torah that we're putting on our hand and head. Though it isn't an actual Torah, but they are equal in that if either of them fall, one is required to fast. So yeah, they're really, really special, really holy, and we are lucky that Hashem has given us this very special mitzvah on a daily basis. Okay, what happens if you need to take off the tefillin? As I've mentioned on numerous occasions, the Torah's perspective is that a person should never delay using the washroom. And the same thing would certainly apply if a person was davening and then felt that they needed to go. So if you remove the tefillin because you need to go to the lavatory, when you return and put them on, you must again make another bracha. The truth is that this would apply if a person relieved himself, but if he just urinated, then the consensus seems to be that he would not be required to make another bracha. The reason for this is similar to what we mentioned earlier about a talus, that once you make the bracha, so that bracha stays on the mitzvah. If you're taking off the tefillin and planning on putting them back on, so you still hold on to the bracha. But if you weren't planning on putting them back on, as we'll see in the, he doesn't say it here, but if you were not planning on putting them back on and then you did, so then your first bracha expires and therefore you need to make another one. Similarly, if a person relieves themselves at the moment of such, so it is forbidden to be wearing tefillin. Since one is forbidden to be wearing tefillin at that moment, therefore the bracha that he made on the tefillin again expires, and therefore one would be required to make another bracha when putting them back on. However, if you are in middle of davening, meaning you're in middle of the section of the Shema, the blessings that come before and after the Shema, from roundabout Baruch Hu onwards, then you would put the tefillin back on, but you're at a point in davening where no interruptions should be made, not even for the tefillin. In such an instance, you would put them on, but you would only make the bracha after davening the Shemona Esrei, after davening the Amidah, at which point you would touch the tefillin and make the bracha. Then it is worth mentioning that some halachic authorities say that even in the blessings of the Shema, if one is between paragraphs, one would be able to make the bracha. Not so common, but certainly this question can come up as far as whether one makes another bracha. And the answer is yes, unless one took them off and to not do something that one can't do while wearing tefillin. So if, for example, you're wearing your tefillin and suddenly you get a call, I need your help around the corner, I don't know, somebody's stuck or something stuck, and you just kind of jump into your car and you plan on coming back to shul, or you plan on putting on your tefillin again. So since you were intending to put them back on within 2-3 hours and you didn't do anything in between, which you would not be allowed to do in tefillin. So in such an instance, you would not make another bracha when you put them back on. So in summary, if you take off your tefillin and intend on putting them back on within 2-3 hours, you do not make another bracha unless you relieved yourself in the interim. Okay, moving on to 16. As long as you are wearing the tefillin, your attention must not be diverted from them even for a moment. In the original Shulchan Aruch, he has a few paragraphs to explain. It doesn't mean that literally you can't think about anything else. What it means is that you should be mindful of the fact that you're wearing tefillin and therefore not be involved in any frivolity or silly talk. You know, if you have a good friend that pulls up next to you in shul and you're catching up, so you need to be aware, aside from the concept of not speaking in shul during davening, there's an added dimension here that while wearing tefillin, one needs to have a high sense of respect. He says, except while davening, the Amidah or studying Torah, meaning if at that point you're completely focused on davening, almost to the extent that you've forgotten that you're wearing a tefillin, then that wouldn't be a problem because it is not a disrespect to the tefillin, and it is hard to focus on two things at the same time. Now, it is forbidden to eat a regular meal while wearing tefillin, but eating a snack while wearing tefillin is allowed. So if somebody's brought a bit of l'chaim to shul for a yard side or for whatever reason, and they offer you a l'chaim and you're still wearing your tefillin, you're obviously at a point where you could, you're not in the midst of your prayers where you wouldn't be allowed to speak. So you would be allowed to make a l'chaim while wearing tefillin, that's fine, but not a proper meal. By taking even a short nap while wearing tefillin is forbidden, and as mentioned earlier, that is the reason why we did not wear tefillin at night out of concern. The rabbis instituted that somebody might fall asleep, and while the person is sleeping, they're in less control of their body, and that could be a big disrespect to the tefillin. So in summary, a meal, no. A snack, yes. Sleep, no. Moving on to touching the tefillin. He says you should touch the tefillin each time you think of them, because by doing so, you will not have your thoughts diverted from them. So it doesn't mean you need to constantly be doing that at every moment, but it means in general, when tefillin come to mind, you could touch it. And some kiss it after touching it as well. But again, this is part of being mindful of their holiness. And when you do touch them, first you touch the hand tefillin and then the head tefillin. And he says it's a beautiful custom to touch the tefillin when you mention them during the Shema. So when you say, Ukshartam la'ot al yadecha, you shall bind them for a sign upon your hands. That's your opportunity to touch the hand tefillin. When you say, Yula tatafot beinadecha, then you should touch the head tefillin. You should touch, okay, and then kiss your hands. So that's the general custom, that when you're in the Shema, if you look around, those around you, the next time you get to Shul, may it be soon, please God, with everybody healthy, you'll see that in the middle of the Shema, people touch their tefillin at the moment that they mention them. Okay, moving on to 18. So we have a principle that we may elevate a holy thing to a higher level of holiness, but not diminish its level of sanctity. Some of you may have come across this concept in other areas. Another example of this is, for example, if you had a Torah cover, which was no longer usable for whatever reason, you wouldn't be allowed to take that cover and now use it as a talus bag. Why? Because once that material has been elevated to the status of a Torah, then it goes up in holiness, but it doesn't go down in holiness. So instead, it would have to be buried. And the same goes for the tefillin. As I've mentioned before, and as we'll see now inside, the head tefillin have an added level of holiness over the hand tefillin. And therefore, he says, if you were moving parts, such as the straps, from one to the other, you would be able to use the hand straps for head tefillin, but not vice versa, because the straps are getting an upgrade. But if you're going to take the head tefillin straps and move them to the hand, then they're actually getting a downgrade. And this is beyond the halakhic relevance of the statement. It's a general concept, something that a little lesson we can take with us beyond the laws of tefillin, that we should always be adding in matters of holiness. When it comes to our connection with Hashem, we should always be looking for ways that we can strengthen and grow and add in holiness. Now, the part that's most relevant for this halacha is the very end. Everything before that, you're very unlikely to be doing yourself. You would probably be getting the assistance of a sefer. And so let me go straight to that. The same is true of a bag made to hold tefillin, and in which tefillin had actually been held, either of the two. It is subsequently forbidden to use this bag for any secular purpose. Meaning, if you have a tefillin bag, and then you get a new tefillin bag, you would not be allowed to use the old tefillin bag for anything. It would need to be buried, only for a higher purpose, which would mean, I guess, probably only a Torah. This is also relevant if you keep your watch, if you wear your watch in your secondary hands and you remove your watch when you put on your tefillin, so it would not be respectful or allowed to place your watch inside of your tefillin bag, because then you're using the tefillin bag, which is holy, to hold your watch, which is not. Okay, yes.
I've got a question, which applies to the talus and the tefillin. Let's assume you decided, you did a trip to Israel and you bought yourself a wonderful brand new talus in the Jewish part of the old city, and you come back. There's nothing wrong with your talus or tefillin, and you change them. Are you able to give your one to someone else?
Your bag.
Or do you have to bury it?
I'd like you to suggest the answer because you've just learned the text inside. What do you think?
Well, according to this, it can only go up, and this is going sideways.
No, sideways is fine. When we say go up, we mean it shouldn't go down. Okay, good question. You certainly can use the same bag for a second pair of tefillin, for any pair of tefillin, as long as you're not going down, then you're good. But I guess we say it in the positive sense that we should always be going up in holiness. Okay, but great question. Now, this is also relevant if you have a particular
sorry,
bag.
Rabbi.
Yeah.
Rabbi, sorry, you can ask.
These questions are great. Keep them coming.
Wasn't Terry asking the question of he bought a new talus and new tefillin? Can he give his old ones away?
Sorry, Terry, was that your question? Okay, sorry. You weren't asking
Yes,
about the bag.
yes.
You're asking about the tefillin.
Like you might have a friend who can't afford something, and although you bought a new one, there's nothing wrong with your old one. So you decide to give it to a friend.
Absolutely, that would be a great mitzvah. I don't think one would be allowed to bury tefillin that are still kosher. They certainly should be able to be utilized in whatever way possible. So certainly, you mentioned the talus and tefillin. I want to just clarify that there's a difference between the talus and tefillin because the talus is not inherently holy. The talus is involved in a mitzvah, but it's not holy per se. That's why a talus katan, a small tzitzis, can be taken into the bathroom. The Torah's requirement is only that any four-cornered garment that you may have should have strings on the corners, but the garment doesn't become holy, and neither do the strings. And that's why we said that the strings actually do not need to be buried. They could just be disposed of respectfully. As opposed to the tefillin are holy. The relevance for us now is that you would be allowed to put your watch, your Rolex, into your talus bag because the talus bag is not holy. So that's fine. But not into your tefillin bag because the tefillin bag is holy. Another example of this concept.
Is the Rolex holy? To some people it is.
Depends if you're getting one. Just kidding. So another practical example of this is if you have a particular bag that you like and you decide, I'm going to use this for my tefillin. So it may just be a nice little cute bag that you got at some function. But once you designate the bag for the tefillin, then you wouldn't be allowed to use it for anything else. If, however, you're maybe going on a flight and you say, look, this bag will be great for the tefillin or a plastic bag, then you would be allowed to use the bag for other purposes because you only used it temporarily. You never designated it to the tefillin per se. Rather, you just kind of borrowed its use for wearing these tefillin. And I see that the clock has hit 5:20. Glad you were all able to join me and wishing
One
you
more question.
Yes, but those that need to
my mind's working overtime today.
Sure.
This may have been discussed somewhere, I don't know.